John Cena's final match is spiraling closer and the wrestling world is holding its breath, because someone unexpected just threw their name into the ring with a vendetta that's been simmering for over 2 decades. If you're a fan of wrestling, drama that bleeds into real life, then you need to stick around because this story has layers that go deeper than any scripted rivalry. And before we dive into this explosive call-out, make sure you hit that subscribe button because we're bringing you the most intense wrestling stories that you won't find anywhere else. Brooks Jensen just fired a shot heard across the entire wrestling universe, and his target is none other than the man who's about to hang up his boots for good. And what makes this call-out absolutely electric is that it's not just about wrestling, glory or championship aspirations, but about something far more personal and far more raw. WWE dropped a bombshell announcement that they're hosting a massive 16-man tournament to determine who gets the honor of being John Cena's final opponent at the December 13th Saturday night's main event, and the wrestling community exploded with speculation. Cena himself revealed that this tournament won't just pull from the usual suspects on Raw and SmackDown, but will also include talent from NXT and even wrestlers from outside the WWE universe, which opens the door to possibilities that nobody saw coming. This isn't just about giving Cena a worthy send-off, but about creating a moment that will be talked about for generations, and the stakes couldn't be higher for anyone who steps into that tournament bracket. The announcement sent shockwaves through every wrestling promotion because suddenly wrestlers who never thought they'd get a chance to face Cena are now seeing a window of opportunity that won't ever open again. Enter Brooks Jensen, a rising star, currently making his mark in the independent wrestling scene with Evolve, and he's not just another wrestler hoping for a career-defining opportunity. Jensen carried a grudge that's been burning since he was a kid watching his father's career crumble, and he's finally ready to do something about it. He took to social media with a message that cut straight to the bone, saying it's been 22 years since John Cena screwed his father's career over, and maybe his time is now. Those words weren't just a call-out, but a declaration of war rooted in family history and professional revenge that transcends the typical wrestling storyline. The post immediately went viral across wrestling communities, with fans digging into the history to understand exactly what Jensen was referring to and whether his claims held any weight or if this was simply a desperate attempt to insert himself into the conversation. For those who don't know the backstory, Brooks Jensen is the son of Bull Buchanan, a wrestler who had a roller coaster career in WWE that started with promise but ended in disappointment and bitter resentment. Buchanan broke into WWE back in 1997 and quickly found himself cycling through various gimmicks and factions trying to find his place in the company. He was part of the Truth Commission, a military-themed stable that never quite caught fire with audiences, and later joined the Right to Censor, a controversial faction that played morality police during the Attitude Era's most outrageous moments. While these roles gave Buchanan television time, they never elevated him to the status he was chasing, and his career remained in a constant state of flux, always on the verge of breaking through, but never quite getting there. The Right to Censor gimmick actually had significant potential because it positioned Buchanan and his stablemates as the antagonists to everything fans loved about the Attitude Era's boundary-pushing content. They would interrupt popular segments, censor risque material, and generally play the role of fun killers, which generated legitimate heat from audiences who didn't want anyone messing with their entertainment. Buchanan fit the enforcer role perfectly, with his imposing physique and serious demeanor. But even within that successful faction, he was never the focal point. Steven Richards led the group, and Buchanan remained in the background, a valuable member but not the star, which seemed to be the story of his entire WWE run regardless of what role he was given. The real turning point came when Bull Buchanan aligned himself with a young upstart named John Cena, who was just beginning to develop the persona that would eventually make him a household name. Buchanan became Cena's enforcer, rebranding himself as B2 or B squared, serving as the muscle behind Cena's early heel character. This partnership looked like it could be the break Buchanan needed, a chance to ride alongside someone who clearly had star potential written all over him. The two worked together for a while, with Buchanan providing the physical intimidation, while Cena handled the mic work and charisma that was already starting to separate him from the pack. At the time, Cena was still finding his voice, experimenting with his character and trying different approaches to connect with audiences, and having a credible enforcer like Buchanan gave him an added dimension of threat. The chemistry between them seemed to work well enough on screen, with Buchanan playing the silent intimidator, while Cena did most of the talking and trash-talking. It was a classic pairing that wrestling has relied on for decades, the charismatic leader with the powerful muscle who backs up his boss's words with action. Buchanan was doing his job effectively, and for a moment it seemed like this partnership might finally give him the consistent television time and character development he'd been searching for throughout his WWE tenure. Fans who remembered Buchanan from his previous runs were curious to see how this new dynamic would evolve and whether it would lead somewhere significant for both men. But then everything fell apart in a storyline that would have lasting consequences beyond the script. During a match against Los Guerreros, Cena's team suffered a loss, and in typical heel fashion, Cena needed someone to blame. He pointed the finger directly at Bull Buchanan, claiming his enforcer had cost him the match and that he needed someone more reliable in his corner. This led to Cena brutally turning on Buchanan and replacing him with Rodney Mack, who took on the name Red Dog and stepped into the enforcer role that Buchanan had just been kicked out of. It was a classic wrestling storyline where the arrogant heel discards his ally, but for Buchanan, the consequences extended far beyond the television screen. The beating Cena delivered to Buchanan to write him out of the storyline was vicious and definitive, sending a clear message that Buchanan's services were no longer required. What made this situation particularly brutal for Buchanan was the timing and the trajectory of what followed. Not long after being written out of Cena's storyline, Bull Buchanan found himself released from WWE, and his career in the biggest wrestling company in the world was effectively over. While WWE releases happen all the time and many factors contribute to who stays and who goes, Buchanan apparently saw things differently. In 2011, years after his release, Buchanan went public with his feelings and directly blamed John Cena for ruining his life. He claimed that being associated with Cena and then unceremoniously dumped damaged his reputation and career trajectory in ways that he never recovered from within the American wrestling scene. According to Buchanan, the stigma of being the guy who wasn't good enough to stay with Cena followed him and made it harder to get booked at the level he believed he deserved. The accusations Buchanan leveled weren't just about losing his job, but about how the entire situation affected his marketability and his standing in the wrestling community. He suggested that being publicly rejected by Cena on television created a perception that he was unreliable or not talented enough to hang with rising stars. Whether or not this perception was fair or even accurate is debatable, but perception becomes reality in wrestling, where your value is often determined by how you're presented rather than just your in-ring abilities. Buchanan felt branded as a failure, and that brand stuck with him long after he left WWE's employ. Now, Buchanan did manage to find success overseas, particularly in Japan, where he worked for All Japan Pro Wrestling and Pro Wrestling Noah, two promotions with strong traditions and loyal fan bases. He carved out a respectable career there and proved he still had value as a performer, working with talented wrestlers and contributing to shows that mattered. The Japanese wrestling scene has always been more welcoming to American wrestlers who didn't make it big in WWE, and Buchanan was able to continue doing what he loved even if it wasn't in front of the massive audiences he would have reached staying in America. But the sting of what happened in WWE clearly never faded. For Bull Buchanan, the story of his WWE career would always be tied to that moment when John Cena threw him aside and watching Cena go on to become one of the biggest stars in wrestling. History, while his own American career stalled, must have been a bitter pill to swallow year after year. The contrast between their careers after that split couldn't be more stark. Cena rapidly ascended to become the face of WWE, winning multiple world championships, headlining WrestleMania after WrestleMania, and eventually transcending wrestling to become a Hollywood star and mainstream celebrity. Meanwhile, Buchanan was working shows in Japan that most American wrestling fans never saw, building a solid career but one that existed in complete obscurity compared to what Cena achieved. Every time Buchanan saw Cena on television or on a movie poster, the reminder of what could have been must have been inescapable. Whether Cena actually had anything to do with Buchanan's release or if it was simply a creative decision made by WWE management became almost irrelevant because in Buchanan's mind, the connection was clear and undeniable. Fast forward to today, and Bull Buchanan's son Brooks. Jensen is now pursuing his own wrestling career and he's carrying the weight of his father's unfinished business on his shoulders. Jensen has been grinding on the independent circuit, honing his skills and building his reputation with companies like Evolve, and he's shown real potential as a performer. But this call-out isn't just about getting a big match or making a name for himself through controversy. This feels personal, like a son trying to reclaim something that was taken from his family before he was even old enough to understand what happened. Growing up as the son of a wrestler who believed his career was sabotaged must have shaped Jensen's entire perspective on the business and on John Cena specifically. Imagine being a kid and watching your father struggle with bitterness and regret over how his wrestling career ended. Imagine hearing stories about how things could have been different if only this person or that decision had gone another way. For Brooks Jensen, John Cena wasn't just another wrestler on television, but the man his father blamed for derailing his dreams. That kind of narrative gets internalized deeply and becomes part of how you see the world. Now Jensen has the skills and the platform to actually do something about it, and he's not letting this opportunity pass without making his intentions crystal clear. His call-out wasn't subtle or diplomatic, but direct and loaded with genuine emotion that you can't fake. The timing of Jensen's call-out is absolutely perfect from a storytelling perspective, because John Cena's retirement tour has been framed as a celebration of his legendary career and a chance to give back to the wrestling business that made him a star. Cena has been making appearances across different shows, working with younger talent, and setting up his final matches as moments of honor and respect. He's positioned himself as the grateful veteran who wants to elevate the next generation on his way out, a noble approach that's earned him praise from fans and fellow wrestlers alike. But Jensen's challenge injects a completely different energy into the narrative. Instead of a grateful opponent thanking Cena for the opportunity or a rival trying to cement their own legacy by beating him on his way out, Jensen represents unresolved conflict and genuine animosity that predates his own wrestling career. This isn't someone who grew up admiring Cena and dreaming of sharing the ring with him. This is someone who grew up resenting Cena for what he allegedly did to his family. That distinction matters enormously because it changes the entire emotional context of a potential match. Instead of mutual respect and a passing of the torch, you'd have real tension and real stakes that go beyond championships or win-loss records. Jensen wouldn't be trying to prove he belongs on Cena's level, but trying to make Cena pay for sins committed against his father. That's a fundamentally different motivation, and it creates storytelling possibilities that you rarely get in modern wrestling, where almost everything is carefully scripted and sanitized. The question now is whether WWE will actually give Brooks Jensen a spot in this tournament, or if this will remain a social media call-out that never materializes into an actual match. WWE has shown in recent years that they're willing to acknowledge real-life conflicts and outside storylines when it benefits their product, and the idea of a second-generation wrestler seeking revenge for his father could make for compelling television. Jensen isn't a household name yet, but neither were many wrestlers before WWE gave them a platform, and sometimes the best stories come from unexpected places. WWE thrives on these kinds of personal narratives because they feel authentic in ways that manufactured feuds often don't. On the other hand, WWE might view Jensen as too much of an unknown quantity to trust with, something as important as potentially being John Cena's final opponent. This tournament is being positioned as a major event, and every participant needs to feel like they belong in that spot. Filling one of those 16 slots with someone primarily known for a social media call-out rather than their body of work could be seen as risky, especially when there are established stars and fan favorites who would kill for that opportunity. WWE has to balance the intrigue of Jensen's personal story against the practical reality of delivering a tournament that feels legitimate and stacked with worthy competitors. The last thing they want is for fans to feel like spots were wasted on people who didn't deserve to be there. The wrestling community is split on whether they want to see this match happen, because on one hand, the emotional weight behind Jensen versus Cena could create a genuinely unique moment. Wrestling is at its best when real emotions bleed through the scripted entertainment, and Jensen wouldn't have to fake his motivation or manufacture intensity. Every move, every promo, every interaction would be fueled by something authentic, and audiences can always tell the difference between performers going through the motions and someone fighting for something that actually matters to them. If WWE pulled the trigger on this, they'd be tapping into a story that writes itself and carries built-in drama that most feuds have to work months to establish. The promos alone would be electric, with Jensen bringing real fire and Cena having to respond to accusations that have legitimate history behind them. On the other hand, some fans argue that John Cena's final opponent should be someone who has earned that spot through their accomplishments and standing in the industry rather than through a personal grievance. Cena has faced and defeated virtually everyone worth beating during his career, and his last match should reflect the magnitude of his legacy. Names like Roman Reigns, CM Punk, Randy Orton, or even an NXT call-up like Trick Williams or Carmelo Hayes feel more fitting for such a monumental occasion. These are wrestlers with established credibility who could deliver a match that honors Cena's contributions to the business while also elevating whoever stands across the ring from him. The argument goes that Cena deserves to go out against someone who represents the current peak of professional wrestling rather than someone settling a family score, but perhaps that's thinking too traditionally, because wrestling has always been at its most interesting when it breaks from formula and does something unexpected. The safe choice would be putting Cena in there with another main eventer for a match that checks all the boxes, but doesn't necessarily create a moment that feels different from anything we've seen before. Jensen challenging Cena injects unpredictability and genuine emotion into what could otherwise be a paint-by-numbers retirement match. Sometimes the most impactful moments come from taking chances on stories that feel real rather than playing it safe with what's familiar. WWE built its reputation on taking risks and creating stars out of unlikely candidates, and this could be one of those situations where betting on the underdog story pays off in ways nobody anticipated. What makes this situation even more fascinating is how it reflects the complicated reality of wrestling careers and the long shadows that stars cast over the people around them. John Cena didn't personally fire Bull Buchanan, and he probably had little to no say in the creative decisions that led to Buchanan's release. But perception matters, and if Buchanan believed that his association with and subsequent abandonment by Cena damaged his career, then that became his reality. Wrestling is a business built on relationships and reputations, and being on the wrong side of a storyline with someone who's on their way to superstardom can have consequences that echo for years. How many other wrestlers have similar stories about being collateral, damaging someone else's rise to the top, but never got the chance to voice their grievances or seek any kind of closure? Cena has addressed various controversies and accusations throughout his career, including claims that he's held other wrestlers back or influenced booking decisions to benefit himself at others' expense. He's always maintained that he's just doing his job and making the decisions he believes are best for WWE and his own career. Whether Cena bears any actual responsibility for what happened to Bull Buchanan is debatable, and probably impossible to untangle from the complex web of backstage dynamics and creative decisions that define WWE. But what's not debatable is that Brooks Jensen believes his father was wronged, and he's now in a position to do something about it. That belief is powerful, and it's driving him to take a shot that most people in his position wouldn't have the courage to take. The tournament format that WWE has chosen for determining Cena's opponent adds another layer of intrigue, because it means Jensen would have to actually win matches to earn his shot rather than just being handed the opportunity. If WWE did include him in the field, he'd likely be positioned as a major underdog, with virtually no one picking him to advance very far. But tournament structures are designed to create Cinderella stories and upsets, and there's dramatic potential in watching Jensen fight his way through more established names while carrying the weight of his family's history. Each victory would feel earned, and by the time he potentially reached Cena, the audience would be fully invested in whether he could complete his quest for revenge. The journey through the tournament would build his credibility and make him feel like a legitimate threat rather than just an angry kid with a grudge. Of course, there's also the very real possibility that this entire situation plays out only on social media and never makes it to WWE television. Wrestlers call out other wrestlers all the time, and most of those challenges never result in actual matches. Jensen might be using Cena's retirement tour to generate buzz for himself and raise his profile in the industry without any genuine expectation that WWE will respond. In that case, this becomes a smart piece of self-promotion that gets his name into conversations, alongside one of wrestling's biggest stars, and even if the match never happens, the association alone could benefit his career. Just having people Google his name and learn his story is valuable exposure. That money can't buy. As John Cena's final chapter approaches, every decision WWE makes about his remaining matches will be scrutinized and debated by millions of fans who have followed his career for over 2 decades. Cena represents an era of wrestling that's coming to an end, and whoever stands across the ring from him in his final match will forever be a part of that legacy. The pressure on that opponent will be immense because they need to deliver something worthy of the moment while also dealing with the emotional weight of being the last person to share the ring with an icon. Brooks. Jensen stepping into that role would be one of the most unexpected and potentially powerful choices WWE could make. The wrestling business has always thrived on blurring the lines between reality and performance. And the story of Brooks Jensen calling out John Cena to avenge his father sits perfectly in that gray area where genuine emotion meets professional ambition. Whether this leads to an actual match or remains an internet footnote, it's already succeeded in making people talk and reminding everyone that the stories we think are finished sometimes have chapters we never saw coming. Make sure you subscribe to stay updated on whether Brooks Jensen gets his shot at revenge and to catch all the latest developments in John Cena's historic final run, because this is one story that's far from over, and the next few weeks could change everything for everyone involved in this unfolding drama.